Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our webinar on building resilience. My name is Martin. I'm from CPL Learning and really looking forward to hosting today's session along with Peter Abbott, who I'll introduce very shortly. Today, we will be exploring what resilience actually means and how it supports our mental health. And what we'll aim to do is to get some practical ways on how we can all build our resilience. So please do get involved today. We'd really like your input. So both through questions and through comments and your ideas and tips that you have. So what you'll see on your GoToWebinar control panel is a tab with questions on. So please, if you have a question or would like to make a comment, please pop it on there. I'll keep monitoring that, as will my colleagues at CPL, and we'll look to ask those to Peter, who's our expert in this matter. Now then, it's my pleasure now to introduce you to Peter. Peter is from an organization called the Mind Map and is an expert in mental health matters. And Peter is going to guide us through the material this morning. So welcome, Peter.
Thank you, Martin. Welcome, everybody. My name is Peter Abbott, as Martin's introduced me as. I am an accredited instructor for Mental Health First Aid England. So I'm licensed to deliver all of their adult courses, including Mental Health First Aid England. And welcome to today's session. I hope you're going to get a lot out of it. What we're going to go through is we're going to go through resilience. We're going to talk about resilience as a term that's bandied around, and sometimes people get an understanding of what it is, but in the main, a lot of people think, well, people keep telling me I should have this resilience, but what is resilience? So we're going to explain more about what that is, and then we're going to talk about the things that can affect our resilience, and in the main, that tends to be stress. So we're going to explain a bit more about what stress is, and then how that can possibly lead to some negative thoughts, and then what we'll move on to then is, okay, let's have a look at some practical things that we can help with this. How can we look at our resilience, how we can then perhaps build on that resilience, look out for any potential risk factors within our resilience, and then put together some ways of looking after our well-being and being able to traverse what's going on, because we're living in quite stressful times. We're in unprecedented times. We've gone from living in normal living mode to survival mode with the COVID pandemic outbreak, and that's affected all areas of our lives. And then when people talk about this and they talk about it's impacting our resilience and we should check in on our resilience, so it can be a bit of a minefield with individuals thinking, okay, well, first and foremost, what is it? What I'd love you to be able to take away from today's session, if you can, and what Martin and I and everybody in the team, the CPL, want you to take away is understand what resilience is. And then from that, we're going to move on, as I say, to think about stress. And stress is one of the biggest drivers in pushing our mental health down and making our mental health decline. And in particular, with regards to stress at the moment, we're feeling stresses from all different types of external and perhaps internal sources as well. And then we're going to look at ways to look after yourself during this period. And then from that, let's create a foundation, a really good foundation for us all. And we can take that beyond COVID. COVID will come to an end. And we'll return back to what we deem to be a more normal life. It might not be the same as where we were before, but it means that we can build the tools to be able to traverse going forward with regards to it. Okay, so what we're talking about, resilience. So he says, as he tries and gets the slide to go, just bear with me. There we go. So let me have a look at this. There we go. So practical ways to look about your mental health and beyond. So let's talk about resilience. So what is it? What is resilience? So the definition of it and what resilience is the ability to be happy and successful, for example, again, after something difficult or bad has happened. So it's that bounce back. It's about having this protective coating around ourselves as individuals, and in particular our mental health and well-being, so that when we do have things that come in and they're perhaps in a negative light or a stressful light, what it means, it gives us the ability to be able to bounce back effectively. That's what we're doing. We're looking at bouncing back and becoming, making sure our wellness and our mental health is, whilst it might be affected temporarily, we have the tools in place to be able to bounce back from each and every event that might be attacking our resilience. It's been tested. You can see there, and I put it on the slide for us. It's been tested this year for millions of us because of COVID-19. And as I said a little bit earlier, what we do on a normal living day-to-day basis is that we go along and we traverse modern life, and we have a normal living mode. So we know what's expected. We know when we have the heady days of perhaps going into work. So we go into work, we know what's expected. We had our social connections with regards to what was going on. We had families, we had friends, we had our colleagues. And then we also had the ability to go out and enjoy a social life. So this is all in this pandemic where we were forced to lock down. We were told that we couldn't go to work because of the COVID-19 outbreak. So that changed. So what's happened there is that us as humans, when it comes to being modern humans, what we've done now is we've gone into survival mode. And what happens then when we go into survival mode is that we then employ our early morning detection system. And I'm going to make this more clear when I talk about stress, but we're on alert constantly. We're looking for threats. Now, those threats could be physical threats, they could be work threats, financial threats, they could be social connectivity threats. They could be internal threats, so it could be a negative thought process that we're having when it comes to these threats that we're facing. So this impacts our ability to traverse life. And as I say, we're in survival mode with this when it comes to it. So what we need to do is understand what resilience is, and that's what we're going to try and impart to you today, and then build on that and go, okay, then check in with ourselves. Where's our resilience today? How can we, are we capable of coping with what's going on at the moment? And if we're not, let's think about putting some things in place to give us those extra bit of what we call resilience, or those tools to be able to cope with what's going on at the moment. So what is it? So we talked about resilience, and as I said there about the ability to be happy and successful and bounce back from life's adversities that throw at us. Now, when it comes to resilience, the modern human and what we deal with today is far different than and it's only been in the last couple of 100 years that modern life and the industrial revolution, and that's taken over, and we're moving at such a fast pace with innovation and technology and modern life and the new next thing and what we should be doing to look after ourselves. We needed less resilience in times gone by. So if we take it right back to basics, when we're talking about resilience, we're talking about, for example, in days gone by, if it was raining, we would take shelter and perhaps sleep through the rain and take some time to live in the moment or look after ourselves whilst we couldn't undertake jobs perhaps when it was going out raining. So in this in turn, it reduces our stress and brings it down. And we needed less things that we needed to have resilience for. Life was much, much simpler. And as I say, the last couple of 100 years, we've catapulted forward so fast that the resilience we need now for modern life is much more complicated. We've got modern technology where we have mobile devices. These are only devices. I mean, I'm getting on a bit now in years. So I can remember a time before mobile phones. I can remember a time before tablets. I can even remember a time before computers. I was on the old Commodores when they first came out, showing my age there. But what we've done with the speed of innovation, it means that we're constantly being stimulated, and that can sometimes be in a negative way, and it can sometimes be in a positive way. When it comes to modern technology, it's been instilled in us that we need to chase the dreams, and we need to perform, and we need to be successful. And we're told from an early age of what we need to do and how we need to traverse life and be successful in it. But what we're not told sometimes, and what we're not taught, is put coping mechanisms in place for when we have setbacks or perhaps failures, and putting that in place. So what we need to do, it's essentially down to us now as individuals and as young adults going forward, is that, okay, we might not have been given those tools perhaps coming through school and coming through education, or perhaps we weren't taught those life skills from our parenting, for example, or social skills with regards to how we traverse all of this. So what we need to do now then is go, okay, then recognize that we're not always going to have good days. At times, we're going to have bad things that happen to us, and it's not necessarily huge things that we're talking about. That we need to have resilience for. It's everyday things, such as like there might be small disappointments, and if these start to build up, and we've got perhaps no helpful coping mechanisms in place, so we've got unhelpful coping mechanisms in place. Simply things such as running late for an appointment, or you missed a program on television, or you've had words with a friend or a family member. And these can start to build up if we don't have the ability, for example, for conflict resolution. It's these life coping skills to be able to cope with it, or financial life skills, or relationship skills, or indeed even mindfulness skills when it comes to it. If we don't have these in place as a good foundation, then what can happen is modern life comes along, these can start to bounce at us, and then these can really start to affect us. So it's about building up this good coating of what everyone calls resilience, this buzzword that's around at the moment, that's there with regards to it. So let's figure this out. Now, we already do this when it comes to physical resilience. We've been programmed for this now for the last few decades, where we think about our physical health. So we're told, look, we need to think about diet. We need to eat a good balanced diet. We need to drink lots of liquid. We talk about the 8 pints of water a day that we need to consume to keep our bodies hydrated.
Peter, could I just dive in there, because I love some of the way you described what resilience is. There's no questions from our delegates yet, but there was just one in my mind. I think the way you've set that out, what resilience is fabulous. And towards the end of your discussion there, you started to talk about the relevance of it and how getting over the little everyday problems that we all face. But do you see any particular relevance for people in the hospitality industry? Most of our delegates today will be in the hospitality industry. I just wondered if there was anything particular at the moment that was going on in that industry, or indeed the industry itself, that we could just explore for the delegates.
Absolutely. So hospitality, I worked in it, so I'm very familiar with it a number of years ago when I was around about 18 through to 24. So I understand it when it comes to the resilience of it. So what have we got when it comes to hospitality? You're losing that human connection. The hospitality industry is a very social industry for people. It's the very essence of it. You guys are providing a service for people essentially to come out and enjoy themselves. So when it comes to the resilience of yours in this particular industry, what we're talking about here is, you're probably struggling that you've been, because it's one of the industries that's massively been impacted with COVID, in that it's one of the default industries to go to. If we need a lockdown, let's lock down hospitality. If we need to reopen and open services, it was one of the last to be considered. So when it comes to the resilience there within this particular industry, you've also got to consider as well, when it comes to this, where we are in this instance, that you haven't got that routine. You're not going to work on a regular basis. Hospitality industry also tends to be in the evening, when you're working at the evening and working along those. So when you're broken from that routine, it can impact our resilience because of that lack of routine. And particularly in an evening time, that's when most of the people, when we're all in lockdown, people are becoming more insular and isolated and locked down in their local houses. So we're missing that social connectivity as well when it comes to it. So you in the hospitality industry, you really have been hit hard with it, more so than in other industries. So with that in mind,
is it true to think as well, Pete? Sorry to interrupt again, but is it true to think that the nature of hospitality, and particularly post-lockdown when the industry was reopened, there was a lot of anxiety, obviously, with guests going into hospitality, and is that likely to transmit or cause any stress or conflicts between the guests and people working in hospitality?
Sure. Because when you do reopen as well, and be forewarned, when the hospitality industry opens, because we'll open on the 2nd, and you will be inundated. People will be going out there. They'll be going back into that routine. We're leading up to Christmas. So be prepared for customers, perhaps, who, even with them, with their mental well-being, they're going to be let out. And I don't want to use derogatory terms when it comes to our clients, when it comes to the hospitality industry, but they're going to go out and they're going to make the most of it, shall we say. So when it comes back to that, you're going to be dealing with a set of clients, for example, where, for example, you as hospitality people in the industry, you were asked to start collecting data from customers. So they wanted to know, so you've got the added pressure of this, of ensuring that you're collecting data for the government. So this is added on with it regards to that. So you've got to consider this. So you might have conflict when it comes to gathering that data. So if you have a customer that comes in, and you say to them, because you're being asked to, and this is the protocol to follow, and you simply ask questions such as, can you tell me your name, your address, and your telephone number? We're obliged, legally obliged to take this information. And then you get a kick-off with a customer who's going, I don't want to give you that information. This is making your work even harder when it comes back, because all you simply want to do is get back into the routine, start to deliver in the service and the job that you were already doing. But then you're going to get extra things coming in as a result. And that could be conflict with regards to customers. They don't want to give you this. Or if you've got particular guidelines, like the last time we had that opening of pubs and restaurants and bars, etc., in the hospitality sector, that there was guidelines that you have face masks on unless you sat at a table and you're eating. So you're going to have those kind of perhaps issues to be able to traverse, where you're having conversations where you might have a group of 2 tables where they know each other, but then they decide to group together because they're trying to be clever, and you're going to have to deal with that. So it's having that understanding that, first and foremost, don't take it personally. When it comes to it, and really don't think of that. And that's hard to do. And I get that. It's really hard to do, but don't take anything personally when it comes to it. Don't allow it to affect, to think that you're at fault for this. You're only being told what you need to do in the following the rules and guidelines as a result of it. Does that make a bit of sense with regards to hospitality? Yeah.
That's great. Thank you, Peter. Yeah, I think it does. And I think it just shows the importance of resiliency, of building up that armory against all these things that come to try and impact us both generically, but also the things that we do find in the industry. So it is typically quite long hours. It's often time on our feet. It can be mentally tiring as well as physically tiring. And if we don't look after these aspects of our physical and our mental health, then clearly we could be in difficulty. So that's super, Peter. And I'll dive away again now, let you talk about the next elements of it, and I'll come back with any questions shortly.
Fantastic, wonderful.
Thank you.
So okay, so what we're going to move on to now, excuse me, we're going to talk about stress, but I just want to talk, just finish off a little bit more about resilience. I've got a couple of more things, and I'll move on. So let's think about another thing as well. So when it comes to purpose and our resilience and purpose in life, and that's a big old question to ask. It really is. And if you say, what's the meaning in life? What's my purpose? And we're going very theological when we're talking about that. But humans, their purpose feels very more complicated than perhaps something. Let's think about, I don't know, pick a lion. Let's pick a lion. A lion, what's their purpose? They eat, they sleep, and they make baby lions. And that's what their purpose in life is. And it's very simple for them. Humans, our lives are far more complicated. What's our purpose? Yes, the basics: eat, sleep, maybe have children, a career, society. How do we fit in society? The environment. We've got to consider all of this, because when it comes to, I'm a qualified life coach as well, and when it comes to life and traversing life, it's good to set objectives in the future, because this helps our resilience as well. It gives us a framework of where we'd like to go. And I'm not saying that you should have all the answers now, absolutely not. But think about 6 months' time, what would you like to happen if we're back to normal? It's about putting that time frame in place, because it does bolster your resilience when it comes to it. But the good thing about resilience is you can build helpful coping mechanisms in place to be able to bolster your resilience and give you that extra support. However, you also need to be able to recognize if you've got any unhelpful coping mechanisms in place. And we all do have them. We all sometimes turn to those things that we know we shouldn't sometimes, and we turn into it perhaps if we have a drink, and then sometimes think, you know, I've had a really particular day, so I'm going to have a few old drinks and I'm going to forget about what my day's been like. But if that starts to be a regular thing, then that can start to have a real detrimental effect on our well-being, and that'll chip away at our resilience to be able to cope with things going forwards. So why it feels like it's a really good short-term fix when it comes to helping out if we've had a particularly stressful day, It's thinking about these things about, okay, then when we think about helpful coping mechanisms, and I'll talk a lot more about these a little bit later on, but when we talk about coping mechanisms, we're talking about perhaps something such as, do we go out and get active? I'm not talking about going running a marathon. Do we go out and take active? Do we go and take notice of things? So it's about understanding that. And I was saying, do we have these unhelpful ones as well, and recognizing that? So if we get good coping mechanisms in place, it balances the scales more in our favor when we're faced with stress and stressful times. So that leads on to this, and it's perfect, because some people as well say, okay, what is stress with regards to it? How does it affect me? What is it really? And what can I do about it if I'm faced with a lot of stress? Because evidence shows across the mental health arena that one of the biggest drivers of poor mental health is stress. And if we can address stress and we can recognize it, recognize what our stresses are, our stress signature, so that we know then when stress is starting to affect us, that we can spot it and we can say, right, okay, then what we need to do is we need to do something about it. So what is it? Stress is the body's reaction to feeling threatened or under pressure. That's what it is. Now, let me tell you a little bit more about this, because we have a system to protect ourselves when it comes to stress and anxiety. And actually, some stress and anxiety isn't always unhelpful. So it is built into us to actually be helpful. It's built into us to protect us. So let's give you a quick example. African plain, I talked about a lion before, so I might as well talk about that. African plain, this is what this system is designed to do, that we face stress and why we feel stress. So we've got a herd of antelopes on the African plain. They're all sat about, beautiful morning, they're all heads down, eating the grass. One or two are looking up, keeping an ear out, keeping an eye out. They're smelling on the wind to see if they can smell any threat. Then what happens then, we've got a cheetah in the undergrowth to the side of them, and the cheetah's hungry. So it's looking at the herd of antelopes, and it's going, yeah, I'm looking for vulnerabilities. I want to see one of the antelopes that I can make a meal out of. Now, there's 4 F's in place here, and this is the same system that we employ. There's 4 F's in this system here that can protect the antelopes. They're already doing one. They're flocking together, the herd mentality, because a big herd confuses the cheetah. So it's looking for antelope on the outskirts, the vulnerable ones. Then, so what happens? The cheetah makes its stride, chases after the ones where on the side of the herd where it looks like it's got its best chances. The antelopes then have got a choice of things they can do. They're already flocking. It's one of the inbuilt safety devices, confuses predators. They can now freeze if they wish to. So if they freeze, I'm sure you might have seen the goats, where the goats jump up in the air and then they freeze because they feel under threat. That's their body's defense system, making them lay down and play dead, because that confuses predators. So if the antelope haven't got that option, the flocking didn't work, the cheetahs have gone after them. They can't fall down dead because they need to run, perhaps because that's not an option for them. So they've got 2. They can either flee or they can fight. Now, a fight between an antelope and a cheetah is probably the antelope's going to come worse off. So fighting the way out of the situation isn't going to be helpful. So they're going to run. So the herd set off and run. Excuse me. So when they set off and run, what happens then is the cheetah will chase after them. It will single 1 or 2 out, peel them away from the rest of the herd. The rest of the herd will run off in the other direction, come to a halt, and within about 10 or 15 minutes, they will have resumed back to their normal business of eating grass, popping their heads up every so often to look out for a threat. That's how the stress system is supposed to be employed. Now, when we evolved as humans, we have this same system in us. We've still got it. We've still got this same system in us. It's an early warning detection system. So what happens when we're faced with a threat? So the same as the antelopes when they were faced with that threat, and it's the same for humans. We're faced with the threat. So what happens is cortisone flushes through our body. That will flush through our body, again with adrenaline as well. And what happens then is all our essential bodily functions stop working. So our digestive system will stop working. Sometimes that's when you can feel butterflies in your stomach. If you're a bit nervous, if you're a bit anxious, and you might feel a little bit nauseous, or you feel butterflies, that's the blood leaving your digestive system, because that doesn't need to work when you're under life-threatening situation like the antelope. So that leaves it, and fresh oxygenated blood goes to all the major muscle groups. It then also, your breath starts to pick up, your heart rate will start to pick up, your pupils will dilate so you can see more clearly. And this is now built. This is now, us as humans, as animals, we're now ready for a threat. Now, what happens with regards to modern humans is we've only got one system to employ. It's that same prehistoric system. It's from the amygdala part of our brain, which is the prehistoric part of our brain that's connected to our spinal central cord system. And that is where it runs our heartbeat, it runs our breathing, it runs our kidney, liver functions, it runs the bodily functions, the heating of our body, the cooling of our body. That's the main frame of the system. That's the hardware. So we as humans have only got that one system when it comes to any perceived threats. Now, as modern humans, what we've got now is we've got stress that is coming in from perhaps we're running late for an appointment, or we've missed a phone call, or we've had a negative intrusive thought, or we've had bigger threats. We've had COVID, it's locked us down. We've had problems with work, they've shut all our work down. So what happens is now we've got resilience. We've got our own built-in resilience of where we are at this moment in time. Some will have more than others. It's all depending on where life brought us to at this moment in time. Several factors are built in there when I was talking about that resilience. That's this coat of armor that helps us deal with this stress. And this is being chipped away. This is being chipped away from everything that's happening. So with this stress and going on, if we get, even if we're running for an appointment, what we'll do is we'll trigger that same system as the antelope's triggered. So our body thinks, hang on a minute, this is a life or death situation. What's going on? Where's the threat coming from? And so our bodies will physically and psychologically react to it with regards to it. And so if we have this understanding about stress, and if we have too much of it, as it says on the slides there, it can affect our mood, it can affect our body, it can affect our relationships. And if we experience stress over a long period of time, it can feel we can end up feeling physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion. It will impact on every part of our lives. And sometimes you hear this terminology. It's another buzz phrase here, burnout. Yeah, people will hear that, and this is what we're talking about. It's a continual stress where we switch this system on, and then when we've got this system on, we're on burnout. I can see Martin's here.
Yeah,
So
no,
fire away.
Just to support your discussion, I think it's fascinating, particularly hearing about, how this is a natural process that's evolved with ourselves. And I love your story about the antelope and the cheetahs. That really puts it in perspective. I'm just interested, with no questions yet from our delegates. I'd love to hear from any delegates on maybe what's causing them stress at the moment. That would be really interesting to see. So if you are suffering any stress at the moment, we all are, please do just drop us a note on those questions to let us know what's causing you stress, and we can explore that and get involved with that. But also, Pete, I'm just interested with this stress. We talked about resilience. Resilience we build up to maybe reduce or guard against stress building. Why is that important? What does stress lead to? Too much stress. I think you hinted that stress is causing mental health problems. How big are mental health problems at the moment, would you say?
Oh gosh. So we're seeing the biggest decline in mental health across society than we have ever.
Right.
Because, well, we're talking about probably the last biggest societal impact that this country faced on this kind of scale was the Second World War. Yeah, this is how big this is when it comes to with regards to the impact it's having on our wellness and our mental health. So what's happening is it's starting to chip away at us. So we have got this resilience. Maybe we're thinking, do you know what? I used to go out for a run 3 times a week, but I'm stopping doing that now. And then we start to narrow our lives because we don't feel we've got the get up and go, because we're being hammered by it constantly with regards to it. So we're stressing. When am I going to go back to work? What about my financial situation? Can I afford to feed myself? How's my family? How's my friends? This COVID, am I okay with it? Are my families and friends okay with it? We can see it's coming from everywhere. So our resilience is being bombarded. And you know what? It's okay not to be okay.
I think you're absolutely right. I think in some ways it's a concern, isn't it, that we're so threatened by stress and mental health, but in another way it's a comfort that if we are feeling a bit low, it's okay to feel low. I think that's a phrase I've heard you use before. So I think that could be a comfort for folk, particularly in these difficult times. We're all going through what we're going through, and if you're feeling low and a little bit down, sometimes we can start to chip away at ourselves even for feeling that way. So I think in a way, if that's a comfort, was I right to understand that approximately 1 in 4 people in the UK in a year have
Yeah,
diagnosis?
yeah, figures wise, so 1 in 4 of us who are on here today will have a mental health diagnosis within their life.
Right,
Now, figures that are emerging at the moment, the way things are going, that'll be 1 in 3 of us.
right,
So
okay,
mental health and looking at mental health, it's in the
yeah,
last 15 years that people have really started to think about this. When we used to, I say, I keep talking about my age, but I can remember years ago when you went to work, and that's not that long ago, to be perfectly honest, when I talk about years ago, that you were expected to leave yourself at the door, your personal life at the door. Let's leave all that at the door, and then come into work and perform. That's not what we're talking about now. You should be able to bring your whole self to any situation. And if
mm,
you're struggling at the moment, that's okay to struggle because we're going through very difficult times. So give yourselves a break. Don't think that you're going, okay, this is affecting me, but people are telling me I should be okay and I should look at the positives and let's silver line everything. That's another thing that we can sometimes do. For example, they can say to somebody, might say to somebody, oh, I'm not working at the moment, and then somebody turns around and says, well, at least you're on furlough. Well,
mm,
that's just like silver lining it. That doesn't help that individual, because if that individual is struggling because they're at home, they might be living in a city or a town that's away from their family. They're not being
mm,
able to travel and have that connectivity there. So what we're saying with this, mental health is very individual. 1 in 4, maybe 1 in 3 of us, evidence shows, will have a mental health diagnosis. We've already been looking at physical health for the last few decades, so we know what should be doing. Let's think about the mental health side of it now as well.
yeah, good,
As I say,
good
stress is
thinking,
one of
and
the biggest ones.
just some nice comments just coming in. One from Tiago, who talks about uncertainty is
Mhm.
the biggest stress factor for Tiago. Why would that be? Why would uncertainty cause stress, Peter?
Uncertainty, absolutely. So, because uncertainty, so when we come in and when we're talking about uncertainty, this is now our mental capacity of how we're dealing with it. So, and this is because of some physical things that are happening. So, you have got this uncertainty that's going to push our mental health down. When are we going to go back to work? When are we going to get regular wages? When are we going to get back to a more regular routine in life? Because our routines have been thrown out of the window. And doing that, we're going to talk more about that when we talk about looking after yourself in a moment
Yeah,
with regards to it. So it is that uncertainty, but allow yourself to think and say to yourself, actually, these are uncertain times. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about when we talk about stresses of what you have control over and what you don't.
yeah,
And when you do come to these uncertain times, what we can do sometimes is we'll have all these stresses coming in of what's going on, and then we get overwhelmed, and then we
yeah,
get uncertain, and we're going, right, okay, then nobody, because we're all in the same situation, or the majority of us are all in the same situation, where we don't know what the government are going to dictate in 4 weeks' time. We don't know when we're going to get a vaccine to get back to a more regular routine in the way that we're conducting our lives. So when it's uncertainty, just go with it. Go with that flow. Control what you can as an individual, but the bigger picture of that uncertainty, whilst it's impacting us, what we need to do is go, right, I know that that's happening. I can't control that that's happening. What can I control? Because
absolutely.
this,
I like
yeah,
that. And I think if I can dive in there, Peter, I think one of the things I've felt with uncertainty, if we dwell on uncertainty, it kind of makes me feel a bit worse than I ever did.
mhm,
So, and I once came across the phrase, everything for a reason, and I believe that. And sometimes bad things happen, and well, everything for a reason. And sure enough, when you reflect back in time, that there was a life change at that point, but life got better again. And I think it's that believing in the future, isn't it? So life
yeah,
life is very uncertain at the moment, but we have to be confident that at some point in the future there will be more certainty again. So I think that's a lovely thought.
yeah,
I'm just going
it
to ask
will
you another
return.
question. I'm going to ask you
Of
another
course you can.
question. We're
Fire
gonna
away.
we're gonna be really really sharp with this one, mate, because I know we've got to move on. But there's a lovely question in from Phil who says, Martin and Peter, what are the 3 main things you both do for your own well-being? So I'm going to put that to you
Ooh.
and think about mine. So just
Um,
just a list of
yeah, I'll have to be really careful here. I can't say, "Oh, go and get blind drunk," can I? No, because that's not helpful at all. No, I don't.
possibly not.
Um, I'll say I'm quite open about it, so I'll just introduce it here. I've got general anxiety disorder. I've got obsessive compulsive disorder. So I actually, and you might think some people, and people have questioned this before. They go, I'm actually in a better place with people that's not had declining mental health before. And the reason for that is I've had periods in my life where I've had really good coping mechanisms in place. So the three things I was doing or helping me at this moment in time, it's one that I'm going to give to you. One is called the weekly wellbeing checkup, and I do that quite a lot. I don't do it every week now, but I certainly did at the beginning of the outbreak because I needed to check in. So what I do is I'll check in with my mental health, and then what do I do to cope? I love a bath. A bath is really good. Now, Harvard University, and I love this with regards to this because it's my perfect excuse every time at home with my partner, Jack. So I will say to him, do you want to go for a run? I'll go, I'm going to go for a bath. And the reason is Harvard University did some research and they found that not cortisol release, oh God, what's the word I'm looking for when it comes to exercise? Endorphin release, there we go. The endorphin release that you get from about a 30-minute exercise is identical to a 30-minute bath. Now, as soon as I heard that, my one thing is I will go for a bath every day. I find that this is my time. I put some music on, I dim the lights, I get in the bath, and I live in the moment. So that's what I do. One of my biggest tips is about living in the moment. So that's one for me. Go on, you give one now, and then I'll give another one.
Well, I can reel mine off pretty quick. I've had longer to prepare mine, I suppose. I saw the question earlier. The big three for me, exercise is really important for me. So sometimes I'm going to be having what feels like a bad day, and I'll go out and just do something. It doesn't have to be massive. It can just be going for a walk, but I do like to run and swim and cycle and those sorts of things. So doing that for me, and I think Pete, what that does for me is it puts me in the moment because I have to concentrate on the exercise. So a bit of fresh air, a bit of exercise. Self-affirmations for me. So again, answering Phil, self-affirmations I find really great. So just writing a positive statement. And I tend to choose 2 or 3 affirmations that are relevant for me at the time and just repeat them every day and help me. It makes me feel great straight away. And then the other one is just a vision. So again, if I'm going after some specific goals, really that maybe feel tough and hard, I'll think about it. I'll try and visualize it. What does it look like? What does great look like? And that can be a personal goal or a business goal. And again, that helps me. So that's my 3.
Well, that's good. And tying in with that, that's a similar one to I do as well. I mean, there's a few, so I'm picking from mine. At the end of the day, before I go to bed, I always think of one good thing that's happened that day.
That's good. Yeah. That's good.
So I think about that as well and doing that. And then another thing, because I didn't do the 3 because I threw it back to Martin and went, right, give me time to think. But I don't because I do so many. But another good thing is talking. Yeah. Talking is really, really good. Checking in with your friends, whether you're doing it in messaging, whether you go on a video call, whether you can all get together in a WhatsApp group and have a chat and have a social interaction. That's good stuff to be doing as well. So that's what I do. I talk. I take time for myself and live in the moment and take notice. Exercise is good about being active. That's perfect. That's what you do, Phil. I like the affirmations. That's good for what you do there. And as I say, for myself, just think of one positive thing that's happened because you will find it. And then you go into bed thinking that actually it wasn't all bad. Yeah. All today wasn't bad. Okay. I'm going to move on to the stress container because I've just...
What I was going to suggest, Pete, because I think we've looked into stress. I think it's come across really nicely.
Powers of thoughts.
I think that'd be really powerful. I'm just conscious of time. We've got 20 minutes left. So
I was looking at that then. I'm thinking, God, here we go.
Getting to the well-being checklist, I think, is vital. So if we can get towards that'd be great. I'll leave you to it and try not to interrupt you as much as I am.
Interrupt away. I'm all right with it. Okay, so you'll be able to have a look at the stress container on the takeaway notes. So you're not going to miss anything from that. Don't think we've shortchanged you on anything. You'll have a look at that and it's going to make more sense what I'm talking about. So what I'm talking about now, powers of thoughts and beliefs, and these are really quite powerful because when it comes to resilience, this helps us build resilience. And the reason I've popped this little bit of section in here, and it's well worth reading some more information when it does come. I put a line in there from Shakespeare, Hamlet, Act 2, Scene 2. With regards to a line that's in there, and it says there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And that's absolutely true. Whatever incident happens in our lives, whatever thought we have in our life isn't negative or positive until we attach our own values and beliefs to it. When it comes to it, and when it comes to resilience, and when it comes to looking after our well-being, we need to consider this. Because as individuals, and this is low-level cognitive behavior therapy, and we should practice this on a daily basis because it gives us those tools, it gives us that strength to be able to question things. So what I'm talking about when it comes to powers of thoughts and beliefs, we could have a thought that comes in. For example, let me give you a quick example and we'll put this to bed. Those heady days of when we used to go into work. Imagine if you're going into work one day and you've got a friend, a colleague that you know really well and you get on really well with, and you walk into work and you go, good morning, and as they're walking past, they ignore you. And then you jump to that. First and foremost, you go, how rude. And you might say something a little bit more lubrious than how rude. But you think, how rude? And you think, and so you can go in one or two ways with that. You could think, how rude? Oh, what have I done to upset them? Or how rude, they're ignoring me, so I'm going to ignore them till they talk to me later on. With regards to it. So we've put a negative filter on that situation that's just happened. And it simply could be your colleague was in a rush, you may be rushing to take a phone call or rushing back to a customer and simply didn't spot you with regards to it. But we can put negative filters on things. So when it comes to looking after ourselves, we do have to have a little think about who we are as an individual. And there's not necessarily it's a bad thing that we automatically go to a negative mental filter when it comes to experiences and thought processes, as long as we recognize that sometimes that's what we can do. And then what we need to do then is, if we do get negative thoughts coming in, we need to think about challenging those and challenging those thoughts coming in. And then that helps us, allows us to move on to self-awareness and self-care and having a think about it. So self-care and awareness. We all have mental health. We all have it. What happens sometimes when I'm doing a lot of training, that people will come on and will think mental health is always mental ill health. It's not. Mental health covers our positive mental health and it covers our negative mental health as well. And we all have it. It's linked to our physical health. Our mental health can impact our physical health can impact our mental health, but we all have it, and we all have the capability of moving around a spectrum from positive mental health to poor mental health. And then if we go through poor mental health where it gets to a diagnosable situation, then we could have poor mental health with a diagnosable conditions such as depression, for example. And then once that depressive episode has passed, we'll move back up into a positive mental health without diagnosis. And anybody is susceptible to that. We could have a life experience. We could have a breakup of a relationship. We could have a bereavement, sadly. And this can impact somebody's mental health and push it down. It's the same as what's happened with stress. Stress can push that down as well. So it really is important to look after both mental and physical health and have good coping mechanisms in place for when times get hard. And those coping mechanisms are part of our resilience. So we don't just build in resilience and think that could buffer off. We need to understand that if we are going through trickier times, then and they're harder times, then what we need to do then is go, right, okay, then recognize that we're having these harder times. What can I do about that? How can I tackle that? How can I challenge what's going on with regards to my mental health and give me more tools to be able to get through this difficult moment or these difficult months or whatever that may well be? So it is imperative to understand our own mental health as well as our physical health. Now, for example, let me just put this into context and I'm going to move on to putting some really useful things in for you. When it comes to our physical health, imagine if we had rumbling appendix. I don't know if anybody's ever had appendicitis or had their appendix out, but if you had a rumbling appendix, they tend to rumble a little bit before you need any medical intervention. So you'll get these signs that something's not quite right. So your appendix rumble, you get a bit of pain. You might put up with that for a few days and thinking, right, okay, I'm not sure what that is, but it's not going away. So eventually the pain would become sufficient enough that you would want to reach out and get some professional help. So you might go and see your GP. And you wouldn't think twice about reaching out and going and helping that, because once the pain becomes too much, you're then going to reach out because you want to have that pain go away and you want to have that sorted out. It's the same for your mental health. Our mental health can deteriorate and we might get rumblings. We might get periods where we're going through now, where our mental health is poor or it's declining and it's dropping. And so we need to recognize that so we can first and foremost try and help ourselves with regards to it. And then if things get too much, reach out and get the appropriate care or the peer support, whatever that might well be, that we're talking about with regards to that. So some things.
Perfect timing. I was just going to try and help you with timing, Pete. So yeah, I think if we could if we could talk this through briefly for the delegates, because I think this is really powerful, this
Yeah,
weekly well-being checklist, and then we can maybe move straight to 3 things that we can maybe start to guide people on what they might to do. And I'm really keen at that point
absolutely.
to see if
Yeah.
there's any ideas coming back from delegates.
Fantastic. So this is a takeaway for you guys to take away. It's about addressing your stress. This is really useful to do. If at this moment in time your routine's broken down, you've lost your routine, you know, you're struggling to think about what you should be doing on a week or a day-by-day basis. Because let's face it, you're just on a sit and wait situation in the hospitality industry. Are we going? Are we not going? Are we starting on the 2nd? If we're starting on the 2nd, are we prepared to go? So let's get ourselves prepared from a well-being, physical and mental health capacity. Let's run through this quickly because you're going to take it away. So these weekly well-being checkups, these are 4 areas I want you to undertake if you'd like to. So first thing, ask yourself this question: where's my mental health today? How am I feeling mentally? How am I feeling physically? And then ask yourself, and you've got to be honest with yourself when you're asking these questions, because if you're not honest with yourself, then you're not going to be able to really help yourself. Second thing, are you looking after yourself? And be honest with this. Are you drinking enough water? Are you eating a balanced diet? How did you sleep last night? And when you woke up, did you feel rested? And have a real honest evaluation. Is there anything that you could improve to make things better? Flip over to the 3rd section. How's your thinking today? So we're looking after our well-being, we're thinking about our mental health. Now we're going to think about our thinking. We're thinking about those cognitive distortions, those intrusive thoughts perhaps that might be creeping in. How are your thoughts making you feel? Are any of those unhelpful and they need to be challenged? And when I talk about challenge, have you got any evidence to support these negative thoughts? If you've not, put it to one side, let it sit there, and it'll eventually fade away. It might sit there for weeks and weeks and weeks, but don't acknowledge it because you've got no thoughts. It's your negative filter that's pushing in. And then your stress container. And when I'm talking about a stress container, this is the ability of how much stress a person can handle at any one time. And we're all different from person to person to person. So, for example, I could perhaps handle a certain amount of stress, and Martin might be able to handle far more stress than me, but we're facing the same stressful situation where I would start to buckle and Martin would cope with it because he's got some really decent resilience in there. And he recognizes stress, and he knows that if he has a stressful day, he's going to say affirmations, he's going to run out and do some exercise, he might talk to somebody, and he's going to de-stress, but it's not going to affect him. Whereas me, perhaps, that same amount of stress is bubbling in, but my coping mechanisms, my resilience is lower. So what happens is my stress signature is going to be snapping all the time. My stress is going to be bubbling over. So that's what you're going to be looking at. How full is your stress container? Can you feel you snapping? Mine's indicator is if I'm feeling really stressed, I'll reach out for sweet food. So that's an indicator for me. If I suddenly I'm a craving for chocolate or things like that, I'll go, do you know what? Stress is here. That's one of my signatures that I know I'm being stressed. So please do have a look at this. And find out, and then check in with your stress container. Have you got any coping mechanisms? Whatever that may be. I'm going to go for a bath. I'm going to binge watch Netflix for a couple of series. I'm going to go out for a walk. I'm going to sit out somewhere and take notice. I'm going to do something creative. It's individual to what you are. What are these coping mechanisms that distract you and let you live in the moment? Go on, have you got questions?
I think that's a lovely point there as well, that it is individual. And I think sometimes we can feel compelled that, people talk about exercise, diet, going out into fresh air, doing all sorts of things. But sometimes you might feel under more pressure because you go and do that and think it's not working for me. Running isn't working for me. And I think that's a really nice point I just wanted to underline. So it is individual. I love the fact that it could be binge watching a couple of series. If that works for you, it works for you. So great.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's about as well, it's about how many of us watch television and then we're on our mobile devices as well. And then if you ask somebody about a scene in something, they go, I don't remember that. It's because we're not concentrating on it. We're looking for extra stimuli. Anyway, this weekly wellbeing checkup, this is going to be good for you to take away and give this a go. And it's thinking about looking at it, and there's some more information on there with
Brilliant.
Regards to it. Now, we're going to move on to the last section here, and this is an opportunity for you guys that are here to contribute as well, because you might have some really good ideas about what things that you could share with other people, because you people are all in the same industry. So it could be that somebody's thinking, well, I'm not quite sure what I can do to take away from this, and what can I help? But then somebody may well say something, you go, boom, that's it, yeah. And let's pool ideas. This is what I'm trying to say here. Let's pool ideas about it. But I want you to think about something about taking away from today's session. Guys that are in this industry, Think about reading up about some wines, or broadening your education when it comes to delivering the service of hospitality. Because as I said earlier, you guys are going to be in such demand when we go back. This is the industry that's probably been hit the hardest. However, you're going to be the industry that's in most demand when we go back to our regular routines and being allowed out. So you're going to be inundated with this. So it's about preparing yourself. Take the opportunity to learn new skills at this moment in time for doing this, because you probably won't get this when we go back. You're not going to have the time for it. Before this, you probably didn't have the time for it because you've got work. You're working long hours. You're on your feet all the time. On a day-by-day basis, you're just ticking over just to keep that work, and you just haven't got that free time to do it. Let's take advantage of it. We don't have to and be proactive with it, because you will feel so good at the end of the day. When we're thinking about positive things, this is about things that are working towards bettering yourself, but also giving you that resilience going forward. So learn to make new cocktails. We've got some ideas on here. If you're chefs, try out some new menus, try out some new dishes, and think about going back and think, does this work? Does that work? Be creative. It's an amazing creative industry that you work in, and creativity is one of the 5 cornerstones of helping yourself to be able to give you that amazing foundation in life. CPL, they've got some really good courses online. Check out what they've got when it comes to it. Is there something there that could be added value to what you do in the way of your job? But I'm going to shut up, because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say, right, Martin, is anybody coming up with some great ideas? Because I'd love to be able to hear what people think, and have they got anything that they can share with anybody?
There's a nice comment in again from Tiago, who talks about how meditation is helpful. And Tiago finds meditation helpful in terms of mental health and building resilience.
Absolutely. Yeah, it really does. It's mindfulness. Now, I'm going to be totally honest. Up to 13, 14 years ago, I thought mental health was all wishy-washy. Oh my God, how I suffered over 3 decades. I was going through depressive episodes, etc. I've told you about that briefly. And I used to think mindfulness, what a load of old wishy-washy, what they're talking about. That was my value. That was my belief at that moment in time. And people still hold those kind of beliefs. When we talk about meditation, when we talk about mindfulness, this is about, do you know, when we sit down at the end of the day and we say, I've been on my feet, you've done a long shift, and you come home at the end of your shift and you go, I am physically shattered. And you will sit down on the sofa and you'll let your body rest. We've got to let our minds do exactly the same thing. And when it comes to meditation and doing this, that's helpful. There's some amazing apps out there. There's Calm, there's Aura, there's Headspace. These apps on your phone, these talk you through exercises to bring your body down to a state where you check in with yourself. And when we're talking about meditation, you could start at the bottom of your feet and work all the way up and just lay there, concentrate on your breathing. There's a lot more to go into, but simple, recharging your mind as well as your physical body. And that's about not worrying about what's gone on in the past. It's not about worrying about what's coming up in the future. It's about just switching those off at this moment in time and letting your brain go, and the easiest way to do that when we talk about meditation is to start with the breathing. Feel about your breathing, concentrate on your breathing. And when you concentrate on your breathing, then check in with your heart. You'll be able to feel your heart beating in your chest, and then do a full body. How's your body feeling? Let's check in with ourselves. Yeah. So meditate. It's a great thing to do is meditation and doing it. And if you need guided learning, as I say, there's some great apps out there that can help you with regards to it.
I think that's lovely, Peter. And I think it reminds me of something I read some years ago, an article, and it talks about, and it's very specific to hospitality, indeed chefs in kitchens, which is a quite stressful environment and has quite a high prevalence of mental health problems, should we say. And the point that was being made there was really interesting and backs yours up, in so much that what was said there was that, if we burn ourselves or cut ourselves, we'll dress it, we'll look after it. If we, when we go into the kitchen, we'll wear protective equipment to stop ourselves from burns and cuts, etc. But we don't look after our sort of mental health quite the same. We'll look after and protect and guard against our physical health, but maybe not our mental health. And maybe the breathing and the mindfulness is a way to do that. And I love the idea about, at the end of a session, which can be a long session, and as you say, a busy session, maybe I've had to deal with conflicts and all sorts of things, just to sort of ease out and just take the pressure away again is a real solid idea, I think.
It's a reset. It's a reset for us, as I say, because if we're physically tired, what do? We go to bed and we sleep and we restore ourselves. So we need to think about the same when it comes to our mental health and doing the same with that. And when I talk about mindfulness meditation is one option. Another option is taking notice. Go out. We're in a beautiful season at this moment in time. Go out, leave your mobile device at home. You don't need it unless you're likely to get lost. You don't know your way around the area, but switch off. Switch off and go, okay, then let's give my mind a rest. Go out, the trees look beautiful. Smell, listen, find out what's going on. Delve into the five senses. And this works just as powerful as mind meditation as well. So if you start introducing these things in and putting it in, talking is a de-stressor. And having conversations about that. So if you've had a difficult conversation with clients of conflict, talk with your colleagues and talk it through, because you've experienced the same. You'll all know you're all in the same, and support one another. You're all in an industry now where you're all being impacted with regards to it. So maybe talk to like-minded people, the people that you would work with, that you're on furlough with, and check in how you're getting on, because there might be a situation where you need somebody to check in on you sometime. And doing that. So you need to be proactive. I'm going to be totally honest. Nobody's going to be able to do this for you. It starts with you. It really does. There's a lot of support out there, but you need to think about it yourselves as individuals. And it does start with you. And be honest with yourselves. Am I doing things that are not helpful? If I am, do I need to consider maybe changing those or reducing that? But what do I do that's good? And having that evaluation.
I love that. And we've just got a few minutes left. So again, if there's any questions from the delegates or any comments you'd like to pass to us, we'd love to hear from them. But just in the last few minutes left, is there any areas, Peter, that link with what we've been talking about today? So I'm thinking that, is it sometimes about, so we've thought about dealing with building resilience, we've talked about reducing stress. Are there some elements out there that actually need solving? I'm thinking that people might be in financial problems. Is there any tips in dealing with the broader problems?
Okay, so when it comes to finances in this situation, and we've been impacted and people have been reduced to 80% of their wages, and it was very quick, it was very sudden. A lot of us couldn't plan for this situation, so we weren't expecting to say, oh right, okay, then well perhaps I need to have 2 or 3, 4 months worth of wages as a backup to give me that financial resilience to be able to cope with this. We just didn't expect it. If you are struggling with your finances, have an overview on it, and what you need to do. And you need to be honest with yourself, because what we tend to do is we're frightened with finances, we'll bury our head. If we're frightened with our living situation, we'll bury our head. If we're struggling to get back into work, we'll bury our head. Don't. Be honest with yourself. If you're struggling with your finances, get it down on paper. Part of the stress container and that exercise is about making the lists of stresses that you're currently facing, and that could well be that so when you put all those stresses down in that stress container exercise, that weekly wellbeing checkup, list all your stresses, put a line through all the ones that you've not got no control over. So if it's COVID, you've not got control over that. If it's being locked down, we've got no control over that. If we're on furlough, we've got no control over it. You'll be left with a list of stresses you do have control over. If one of them is finance, look at that and go, right, that's one of my top 5. Finance is one of my biggest stresses, or the lack of finance coming in. So if you owe money, if you've got credit cards, if you've got personal loans, etc., if you've got mortgages, whatever that may well be, do a true financial evaluation for yourself and go, right, this is what's coming in. If it's your 80% of your furlough, and I know in your industry that's going to be really impacted, because you guys relied on tips a lot of the time as well that are not there. So your financial situation could be in almost crisis situation where you're going. So first and foremost, be honest with yourself. This is what I've got coming in. This is what goes out. This is what my commitments are on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. Does that balance, and what am I left with? If it then turns out that you've not got enough to live on because of your financial commitments, then speak to the people that you owe money to. If it's a credit card, they will help you out. Yeah, they will
Super.
defer payments. If it's a
Thank
loan,
you, Peter.
they'll help out. There we go.
That's great, and I think we could probably apply a similar thinking on things like diet, exercise, and some of the physical well-being that also impacts our mental
Yeah,
health. So I love the idea about being honest with ourselves. You know, sometimes there's a problem, we've got to do something about it. The problem isn't going to go away without us taking some action towards it, as hard as that sometimes is when we're all feeling a bit low. So great advice there.
yeah.
Thank you so much, Peter. You know, on behalf of
More
all the
than welcome.
delegates, just like to say a big thank you to you.
More than
If
welcome. I've enjoyed it.
and thank you to the delegates for joining us today on this webinar. We have another webinar next week. Please do sign up for more Aspire content. I think, Peter, if you can move that slide on for me.
I can indeed.
We've got a couple of slides just behind these ones.
He says it's all going so swimmingly well, but
It
oh, there we
was
go.
doing. There we go. So, and we talked about financial resilience. We are just completing a piece of work with a company called WageStream, and we hope to be publishing some real top tips on building financial resilience, and that will be coming through this channel very soon. So please do look out for that. It's going to be a piece of free material. And our next webinar, next slide, please, would be great. Our next webinar, as we've said, is staying on the theme of mental health. And that's looking at some mental health for teams. So delighted next week to be joined in a panel form by more delegates, where we're going to be discussing stories and experiences about how, from a leadership perspective, but also from being in a team, how we can all support mental health for our teams. So thank you so much. Thank you again, Peter, and thank you, delegates. We look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.
Take care, everybody.